All right, so we made a very basic API last time. All it did was basically say hi there on a GET request, which is great. That was your our first API. Very happy about it. Let's up the game a little bit, do something a little more realistic. All right, so the first thing I'm going to show you is we're going to have to create some data that our API is going to expose to the world. Remember, the whole point of APIs are data. All right, so first I'm going to show you this interface I made. I did export interface item. Okay, remember this export is used so that other files can import this interface. And it has four properties: ID, name, cost, and quantity. ID is a number, name is a string, cost is a number, and quantity is a number. All right, take a second and make this interface. It is typical for interfaces to have their own file. Okay, so item.ts will just hold the item interface. There'll be nothing else in this file. Okay, take a second, type this out. Okay, cool. Once you got the interface going, we're gonna do item repo.ts. Okay, I imported the item interface from there, and now I'm going to make what's called an item repo. Okay, we're going to use a repository, not the full pattern, just like kind of the idea of it. So your repo is basically the class that is going to be responsible for holding your data and helping you to manipulate your data. Okay, the repo is the gateway by which we're going to talk and do anything else with our data. Okay, so in this case, I call it item repo because this is going to be dealing only with items. Okay, your real life app may have a lot of different interfaces, a lot of different entities. Okay, I'm going to use the term entity. Okay, so an item is an entity in our app, meaning that we have this concept of item that we need for our app to function. So let's say we're like a grocery store app. That's what I'm envisioning. We're a grocery store app, and this app is going to be used by customers. It could also be used by like people who work for the company. So there's a lot of different things people will need to do. So we have this entity, this concept in our app called item. And an item has these properties, and I've created a private item array inside my repo. So I did class repo on line 3. And then inside the repo, I had private items, which is an array of item. And then I did some just some boilerplate mock data. All right, take a second and pause the video so you can type all this out, okay, because you're going to need it for when we actually have our API do stuff. Okay, and then we're going to work from here, but this is the sort of boilerplate stuff you need to type out, and then we can move on. Okay, cool. So I made this private because I don't want anything outside the repo to be able to mess with my array of items. The repo is responsible for the array of items. Nothing outside the repo is going to ever touch it directly, so that's why I made this private. Okay, so we need to do our CRUD operations. Okay, CRUD stands for create, read, update, delete. Okay, create, read, update, delete. CRUD. Okay, you're gonna hear like CRUD operations or CRUD functions. Okay, or say they'll have you do CRUD. So that is like a common thing that they have junior developers do is they have junior developers write CRUD functions because they're simple. They follow pretty much the same format and they're necessary, right? So, for example, we have these items, okay, in our app. Like we're a grocery store app. People like log into our app and they want to see a list of what groceries they can add to their shopping cart. Cool. All right, so in order to do that, we're going to have to do some CRUD functions. Okay, we're going to do the read functions first. So the R in CRUD stands for read. Right. So what I mean by read? Read means here is the data. Here's the data I have. Picture like this items. This is our database of items. Okay, this is all the items we have in our store. So the first function I want to write is when you write function. Okay, we're inside a class. I have to actually write that. We're going to do get all items, which will return an array of item. Okay, so we have get all items. So what we're going to do is we're going to return items. Okay, return this to items. Okay, this is our read. Okay, it gives all the data. Now, we may not want to just give them back all the items. We may want to give them back a specific item. A common way to basically say an entity is unique is by giving them an ID. Okay, so you might see some people might do like item ID, right? Or some people might just do ID. It depends on where you work. Just follow whatever convention they use. I'm going to just use ID. Okay, and it's unique, meaning that this object right here is the only object in this list that's going to have the ID of 1. It's unique. So if you have like a database will be able to enforce that uniqueness for you. You won't have to like do anything special for it. But we're just going to just do it, just discipline ourselves to make this whole thing easier. So I'm going to just by fiat say that an ID is unique inside this list, so that there's no two objects with an ID of 3. So you might want to be able to get a specific product. So for example, let's say you're like going through your app and you're like, oh cool, I want to click on the bread, right? And then you click on bread. Well, I don't want to get all the items because I know what item I want. I want bread specifically. So to get a specific item, I'm going to do get item by ID. It's going to take it an ID, which is a number. It will return either an item or undefined. Now, why is it returning undefined, possibly? Remember, this bar means it could be either of these things, so meaning that this function could return an item or it could return undefined. Okay, let's, for example, if they give me an ID of 3, then this should return bread. It should return this whole bread object. What happens if they give me an ID of 100? There's nothing in my list that has an ID of 100, so therefore I'm going to return undefined. So basically, I give them back an item if it's an item that exists. If it doesn't exist, I'm going to give them back undefined, but like I don't know what that is. All right, cool. We're going to use the find function. So I'm going to do return this.items.find. Okay, find takes a function as a parameter. It's a callback. So we're going to do arrow function x arrow x.id triple equals id. So I want to find the first object in this array whose ID is equal to the ID that was passed into the function. Okay, and then if it find does not find the ID, it will return undefined. So I've got my read function. So I'm going to put a little note here. This is the read. Okay, these two right here are the when I say CRUD functions, the R in CRUD. This is read. Okay, it just gets data. All right, cool. Let's do the create. All right, we're going to do create item, which will take an item as a parameter. All right, now you may be there. I'm going to do this very, very simply. We would need code. The database should check if the ID is unique when we're adding an item. So normally you wouldn't have to worry about that. When we do our app, I'm just going to, make certain I'm always putting in a unique ID. Normally the database handles that. And we're also going to skip the validation part because that adds a little bit extra complexity. So all I'm going to do is basically say this.items.push item. Okay, so whatever item you give me, I'm going to add it to the array. Okay, again, if you're thinking, well, there should be some checks, I agree. We're just keeping it simple. Okay, that was our create. Let's do our delete. Delete item, which will take an ID. So you'll delete an item by its ID. So actually, let's call it delete item by ID, just to make it really super duper clear. All right, a couple ways you could do this. The way I would do this is you could filter out that item. So return this.items.filter takes it in a function. Okay, so x.id does not equal ID. So basically, since it's unique, like if I put in 5 and I do filter, it'll give me a new array except for the one object that has the ID. So I've basically filtered it out. Okay. So actually, this.items equals, excuse me, I need to update the array. So this.items will equal this new array. So it will basically, filter will create a new array without the object that has its ID and then set the array to that new array that came back from filter. All right, so this is the delete. And then let's go ahead and do the update. Okay, again, update could be more complicated. I'm trying to keep it nice and simple. Let's just say in our app, the only thing that makes sense to update is the quantity. Let's say like price and name are going to be static. Like it's named milk. You're not going to, for the sake of keeping things simple, you're not going to be able to like rename things milk. The reason it could be hard is because you want to make certain these are unique. Like I don't want to call two things milk, then which milk are we talking about? All right, so we're going to say just by fiat in our app, you can update the quantity. So update item quantity. All right, and then you have to identify which item you'd like to update by its ID, and then the new quantity, which is a number. So first we need to find the item by its ID. So let item to update equals, let's do, we already have a function that does that, right? Get item by ID. So let's do this dot get item by ID. Remember, get item by ID could give us undefined, so we'll need a check for that. If item to update does not equal undefined, okay, meaning you found it. Cool, we found it. So that means item to update dot quantity equals quantity, right? So that will update the quantity for us. All right, well, there we have it. So now we can do our CRUD functions. So again, CRUD, it stands for create, read, update, delete. Create, read, update, delete. The create means creating a new thing. So this create item would be an example of create. Read would be getting all of the items or getting the items by ID. Deleting would be just deleting the item from the list, and updating would be updating that specific item by its ID, and then in this case, we're updating the quantity specifically. So in some apps, you might be able to update all the properties of the entity. In some apps, you can only update certain properties of the entity. It completely just depends on what app you're writing. There is no hard rule either which way. Okay, it just depends. All right, at the end, I'm going to export item repo, and this is what we're going to use for the next part of writing our app. But be sure you go over the logic for this. Redo the functions a couple times in your head, so that way it makes sense. But this is basically CRUD functions. A lot of what you're going to be doing as a junior developer.